Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Johnnies Report, where we finally have the AP poll rankings for this upcoming 25 and 26 season. And we also have the Ken Palm rankings as well. We'll talk about that and more on this episode of the Johnnies Report. It's always a big deal when the first AP poll rankings come out. You want to know where your team will be ranked to begin this season. St. John's last year was not ranked to start, but obviously they found themselves in the top 10 when the year wrapped up. So there's a lot of give or take with the AP polls to start the preseason polls. There's constantly in the college football world a lot of conversations about whether or not there even needs to be an AP poll ranking anymore, because if you don't follow college football, maybe you do, but as you well know, Penn State and Texas, the two teams that were ranked 1 and 2, are not ranked anymore, and one has since moved on from its head coach. And Clemson as well has found themselves outside the AP rankings after being in the top 10 to start the year. So there's a lot to take with it. There's a lot to get excited about, obviously, because of the big matchup St. John's will be playing further down the road. As you look at an Alabama game, Iowa State as well on the docket, Kentucky. So there are tons of reasons to look at this and say, hey, I'm excited to see this top 25 matchup further down the road. Maybe if Ole Miss gets into the top 25, they did receive some rankings. That could be a ranked game as well. We'll see. But, of course, St. John's to just be ranked in the top 25 not too long ago was something that many fans thought they may never see again. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where we were kind of saying to ourselves, is St. John's ever going to be a team that finds itself even ranked like 25th or 24th, the bare minimum? But to start the year off in the top 5, to go from what was once a program that was kind of left for dead, I mean, that was an afterthought, and now being back amongst the top 5 teams to start the year off is no doubt a big deal. And it heightens because St. John's has never been ranked this high in a preseason AP poll, which is obviously something that we should all take great pride in. Every single Johnnies alum, of course, is very thrilled that even for the first time since the 91-92 season, they find themselves ranked in the top 10, to say the least. But again, they have never been as high. Their highest was number 7, and that was ahead of the 84-85 campaign. And St. John's hasn't even been ranked in the preseason poll since the 2000 season. So again, there's a ton to be thrilled about for St. John's. There's a lot to be excited about as we embark on this journey. And I mean, there's no doubt this AP poll, top 25 AP poll, is something that, as mentioned before, no St. John's fan perhaps thought would happen 5 years ago, 3 years ago. So that's definitely great to see as well. Now, for the AP top 25, the teams ahead of St. John's, Purdue sits atop the rankings. You know, to be ranked number 1 sometimes can be almost, and as I alluded to earlier on the college football side of things, it can almost be looked at as something that you don't really want. Let's just say that, because Kansas was there last year. That team fell short of expectations. And for Purdue, there's obviously a lot of great things going on there in that program over the last couple of years. We'll see if they can keep that up. Number 2 is Houston, the team that was runner-up, the bridesmaid to Florida. Kind of funny that Florida's 3 and Houston's 2. So that's where the national champions sit. And then number 4 is UConn. UConn received first-place votes. They got 2. I'm kind of surprised St. John's didn't at least receive a couple, because although this isn't really a St. John's team that you've seen on the floor together as a group, you can make the same argument for, every single team above them. I would think that they would have said, hey, if this team, meshes the way that they could in their potential, this team could be the top team in the country, or at least receive votes to be the top team in the country. Duke sits right below St. John's at 6. You got Michigan at 7. That's intriguing as well, with Coach May. At 8 is BYU. And then number 9 is Kentucky, which is obviously kind of funny because, Mark Pope obviously being at BYU before going to Kentucky, and they're above him. But Kentucky at 9 and Texas Tech at 10. For the rest of the Big East teams, there isn't another Big East team in the top 15 or top 20. You have to go all the way down to 23. That's where you'll find the Creighton Blue Jays. And then throughout the rest of the Big East, there weren't any other teams that received votes. So Marquette doesn't have its place in there, and neither does Villanova, although I don't think anyone really thought Villanova would. But just in the offset chance they would have received votes, they did not. So that's going to do it for my take on the AP poll. Now for KenPom. So as I talk about all that, a lot of times KenPom just doesn't add up to where they are in the AP. KenPom rarely ever even adds up to the net rankings. It's why when the net comes out, a lot of people really take to those net rankings. It's also listed on the official NCAA website, so I think that's part of the reason as well. People gravitate to the net a little bit more. But in the KenPom, St. John's is 16. UConn's 5. And in between St. John's and UConn, you got Illinois, Duke, Gonzaga, Tennessee, UCLA, Michigan, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Louisville, and Arizona. That's bizarre the AP poll having a 5 and 6 there with St. John's and UConn to go from ranked 5th there to all the way down to 16 in the KenPom doesn't really make a ton of sense. But, as I alluded to, KenPom's based off of so much analytics, so much, equations that go into it, stuff that, you got the adjusted efficiency margin that they throw in there, and different stuff like that, I think certainly, plays a role. But listen, you're in the top 5 for the AP, and you're as high as 16 in the KenPom. That was in and around, I believe, where St. John's was to start last year. Don't quote me on that. I just blindly remember them kind of being in the teens or maybe in the early 20s. So, and obviously St. John's ended the season where they ended. So, there is that as well. But if you're going by the KenPom, in terms of if the tournament ended before the season even began, St. John's would be probably a 4 seed. So that's, in a word, where KenPom has St. John's. And the other thing, too, you have to remember about the AP poll is there's only 25 teams. If you're ranked in the AP poll at season's end, you're a lock for the tournament. This isn't college football where we sit and look at the APs and, who are those top 12 teams all year long, who sits in the top 5. Like, all that matters a ton. And I'm not saying it doesn't for college basketball, because there are a lot of great matchups that people will set their TV reminders to or make sure they're watching because you got 2 ranked teams going at it. But a lot of the time, it doesn't hold the same weight in both sports. So obviously there is that. But for St. John's, we know the schedule that St. John's has. We've laid it out on here numerous times. There's a ton to really get into as well, in terms of those matchups and what are, the exciting ones to look at. And you look at those AP top 25 games where we sit right now, in terms of your out of conference, right off the bat, you play number 15 Alabama. Then you take on number 16 Iowa State. in the Players Tournament, and you got Baylor as well. Baylor could obviously find themselves in the rankings. There's no doubt that could possibly happen for the Bears, and same with Ole Miss, who you'll match up with after that. Then you got Kentucky in a top 10 matchup as of right now, which is really cool. A top 10 game, Kentucky, St. John's. What more could you want than that in the CBS Sports Classic down in Atlanta, Georgia? For the Big East play, you got, again, number 23, Creighton. That's January 10th out in Omaha. You're going to host number 4 UConn February 6th. You're going to host Creighton February 21st, another top 25 matchup, obviously, as of right now. And then at UConn February 25th. So those are St. John's' top 25 games. At the moment, obviously, that's subject to change. Who knows? Maybe Marquette finds themselves in there. Could Villanova, everything pans out correctly? Could an Xavier team? I know Big East Hoyas here on the Big East Energy Network seems to think Georgetown will find themselves in the top 25. Hey, I'm open for it. We'll see if that becomes a reality. I guess stranger things have happened. But, tons to be excited about right now, obviously, in Jamaica, Queens, at Carnesecca Arena. St. John's did just have an open practice to the media where Oziah Sellers really shined at MSG. Obviously, really cool to see that as well. And, that is a stage where when you get on the floor at the Garden, there's always something magical with those kids. You can just see them light up. I mean, in my 4 years at St. John's, it happened all the time. Or some of the time. I shouldn't say all the time. Some of the time. Where a guy would just, hey, it's MSG. They have their moment. So we'll see what happens there. But going back to those 4 years at St. John's, I was texting with my buddies today, and everyone was like, man, I can't believe where this program is from where we were as student broadcasters, student journalists at WSJU Radio. We would get the top 25 games, or not top 25 games. We would see the top 25 teams when we would play a UConn, when we would play a Creighton and a Villanova or a Providence, or a Marquette, but it would have to do during those Big East games. I mean, I think I can remember really only a couple times where we played a top 25 team. It was never a top 25 matchup, mind you. But I remember Iowa State, I believe, in fall of 22. Arizona, my freshman year, LJ Figueroa had a fantastic game out in San Francisco in the Bay Area. So now to see like 4 potential 5 or 6 out of conference games be ranked is pretty unbelievable, to say the least. And if St. John's moves forward in that Players Era tournament, the number could get even greater. So I know that for a couple other programs, this is just kind of whatever kind of a day. Like, if you're a UConn fan, it's okay, no big deal. If you were a Villanova fan, although they haven't been ranked in the top 25 in a while, it is what, it's another Monday, I should say. If you are a St. John's fan, as I said, you have been waiting for this day for a long time, to where your team is recognized among the top teams in the country heading into the year. We knew this was going to be the case. We had a feeling we were going to be in the top 10, but to be in the top 5, I cannot understate how important this is for the program. And it's another great milestone, small, but I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a program, again, that hasn't been ranked in the top 25 to start a year in this century. So I really don't think there's any reason to not be excited or to feel overjoyed as a St. John's fan. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We will be back on throughout the week. We'll have more stuff to talk about as well as we near closer to the start of the St. John's basketball season. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.